Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on Enlightened Awakening, episode number 2. Today we have Jonny Eborn on the show. John has many experiences to share with us, and he also has a YouTube channel called Souls Remember. I love your channel.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Pretty
It's
high
fun.
time.
It's the same with yours, right? It's a passion and there's a purpose to it. And when you're doing stuff that's passionate, then it's part of the process that helps everybody wake up, but it's also fun in the process too. So I love that.
Yes,
Yeah, and
yes.
thanks for having me on. I love it.
You're so welcome. It's so wild, like, how we connected. Sometimes I'll just, I love to YouTube is my favorite TV channel, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So like at the end of the day, I don't like to watch stuff during the day, but at the end of the day when I'm winding down and getting ready for bed, I'll go on YouTube and I like to watch, like spiritual channels and podcasts and things like that. And I came across yours one day and I was watching a couple of your videos and I was like, wow. And I
Mm.
don't remember exactly what I commented, but I made a comment on one of your videos and you had sent me an email, thanks for your commenting on our video or something like that. And I didn't see it because it was
Oh,
from a
that's right.
profile that I
Yeah.
wasn't really using at the
Oh,
time,
that's right. Yeah.
this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was like, it's time to start this podcast. I had just done a few experiments before now. But so then when I was getting ready to start this podcast, I saw your email that you sent on July 1st and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this poor guy, let me get back to him. He thinks I ghosted him."
I can take rejection. It's fine. But I do actually feel really lucky that you found me and that you reached back out. I think that's great. There are no accidents in life, right? And the timing was perfect. So I love that.
Yeah, and thank you for responding to my
Yeah.
comment because it's like, a lot of times when you leave a comment, you don't hear from the person at all.
Yeah.
And I was like
Yeah.
really honored that you took the
Oh.
time to write back to me.
Well, the thing about producing content on there, especially content that you find is really meaningful, the thing about that is that when somebody takes the time to comment in either way, and I want to say, I think the video you commented on was a video about the divine feminine
Mm.
Barbella. Was after one of the last journeys I had, um, and it's such a personal topic that when somebody takes, and I got a lot of comments on it, hundreds of comments, and I think when somebody takes the time to type something in, I'm assuming that it's a message for me. They're trying to give me a message, and so I'm not gonna just ignore that. And some of the messages weren't pleasant. Sometimes you get people that disagree with your posture, and I still always want to comment and thank people for at least taking the time to chime in and to let me know they watched. And there's a million paths back to God, so everybody has their own opinion. It's fine. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that, but I really take that personally when somebody, I don't know, everybody says don't read the comments because um you get beat up on a little bit in the troll side, but I don't know. I think you have enough
Yeah.
experiences in life where you just let people have their opinion. It's fine. It doesn't really affect me.
Exactly. And this particular genre, I feel like we're to a point where other people's opinions aren't going to. We understand that how other people's opinions affect us is really up to us.
Yeah.
For one. And
Yeah.
I'll take something out. If I remove a comment on my channel, it's just because I don't want somebody else to get offended. But it doesn't usually offend me.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty rare. Somebody's got to be pretty aggressive
Mhm.
for me to hide anything. But it's part of the four agreements, right? If you've read the book, The Four Agreements, part of that is don't take anything personally. It's never about
Mm.
me. Even their compliments aren't about me. Their compliments are about them. Their criticisms about them. It's okay.
Really? I
Just
didn't
don't
hear
take
that about the
anything personally.
compliments.
Yeah, that's the thing about one of my favorite books of all time, The Four Agreements, is it one of the agreements is you just don't take anything personally. And that includes all the nice things people say about you too. Because you realize that if somebody's saying great things about you or they're saying terrible things about you, it's completely from their filter and from their perspective. And you can honor it and you can enjoy it, you can love it, and you can be grateful for it on either side of that spectrum. But at the end of the day, whatever they're saying is really for them. It's their own, it's their own filter and what they're projecting through their own filter. And then you can just love on that. Because if you're not taking it personally, and this is true in all relationships too, personal relationships, if you're not taking any of it personally, then it's really easy to just let people be people and be okay with that. That's one of the biggest lessons I learned. And I've learned it 100 times, but over the years.
Wow. Yeah. I'm just kind of coming full circle. But
Yeah.
I've always been like super animated, whether it's good or bad. You know, I usually try to resonate in the good, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Either way.
we have so many things to talk about.
Good. That's good. I like it.
Yeah. Why don't we start with NDEs? I saw a video on your channel. I know that you didn't personally have one, but
No.
that's kind of
I'm
how
knocking
I
on
got
wood right there.
do what? Yeah,
I'm
right.
knocking on wood. I have
Right,
not had
knock
an
on
NDE.
wood. How I got started down this journey. I mean, I've kind of like been interested in this type of thing my whole life, but what really started me on the path of awakening was my mom passed away in October 21.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you know, I got on YouTube a lot, and all of a sudden on YouTube I started seeing videos of people talking about their NDEs popping up. So of course I wanted to watch them to just I knew my mom was in a good place, but it's just reinforcement, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've heard a lot of NDE stories,
Yeah.
amazing ones.
Yeah.
And I love what you said in your video on your channel. Do you want to like kind of tell the audience for those who don't have a lot of
I
experience?
for sure. I think I had 2 videos recently on NDEs. One just explained the all the commonalities of NDEs, but also some things that aren't often talked about in near death experiences, which I'm the guy that looks for the exceptions all the time. Not pessimistically, but I'm the person that tries to read in between the lines. And then I had another video that drew some correlations that I have found between NDEs and other parts of my work and other parts of my life, right? Like
Mhm.
plant medicine journeys and AI and things like that. So, as I recall, I have to go back in time a little bit, but I think that NDE video where I talked about the commonalities, and there are some great commonalities. Things like they remember leaving their body, they remember hovering over their body, they remember being detached from the emotion of whatever was going on before that. People remember a gravity pulling them away from their physicality sometimes, or in addition to that, they remember having a 360 type of awareness, a multidimensional um, lack of physicality kind of awareness that happens uh, through more than just their eyes, almost telephotically, as they described it. And then they described feeling a gravity that pulls them away from their physicality, away from this existence. And they describe I'm going through these things fast, I know, because these are the common things everybody talks about.
Mhm.
But they go through a tunnel and they get to the end of the tunnel and there's a bright light. And then in that light, a variety of things happen. And one of the things that is common is others from they meet others who have departed, or they meet their deity, Jesus, or they meet, their ancestors, and there's a welcoming party and immense amounts of love and peace. And sometimes they go to a room and sometimes they go to a meadow. And if they go to a meadow or outside, they talk about the colors and how everything praises, everything sings, everything vibrates in colors and sounds that we don't have here in the spectrum. We don't have here, or that we can't see or hear here.
Mhm.
And then there's a life review, and often that life review is in the company of another. Maybe it's Jesus for them, or maybe it's God, or maybe it's another soul. And there's a lack of judgment during that life review, but there's an awareness and acknowledgement of the things. And then often people will describe how they, in that life review, were able to see multi-dimensionality into other people's lives, and not just how it affected their life, but also how that person rippled out to another person, to another person, to another person, and the effect that either the great things that this NDE experiencer did, or the not awesome things that they did in their life, might impact others. And then there's usually a veil where they can't go past. There's some kind of acknowledgement that if you go past here, you can't come back. And then there's a return that says, hey, your work's not done yet, in one form or another.
Yeah,
And
sometimes they have a choice,
yeah,
sometimes they don't.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because all the ones that came back chose, right? So we don't get the lessons from the ones that didn't, that said, no, I'm not going back,
Right,
dude. I'm
right, right.
staying. I'm sorry. You can keep your
Yeah.
lessons. You can keep that 3D nonsense. I'm not there. I'm here. So we don't, all we know is the stories from the ones that came back, which is cool, actually, if you think about that. And then there's often a lot of pain or a lot of discomfort when they get back in the body. And then until recently, it was a difficult thing for people to talk about. You were nuts. You were a nut job.
Right.
If you talked about those things. And so all these, I think it's really cool right now how all these near-death experiences that men and women had 30 or 40 years ago are able to be talked about right now. And they remember them so vividly right now as if it just happened. And I've always been really intrigued in the NDEs that have some verifiable action to it, that they were able to tell what somebody in another room was doing or saying, and there was some level of proof. Not that I think that adds more validity to it than not, but I think that
I feel like it
those are
does.
cool. Yeah, and it's just it satisfies the monkey mind in me just a little bit. The more though that I can tune in, and the more, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but sometimes there are times when I have people that hit me up for to be on a show on my channel, and I can tell, like, no, this is more about selling a book or something. This isn't about a real experience. And so the more I tune into that part of it, the better I am able to not worry about the proof in the pudding. I'm able to just see into it and know what's real and what isn't. But so those are the things that are common. And I think the video that you might have watched talked about the things that aren't as common, that aren't as often talked about. And I tried to draw some lines in there about things like that. At no time did anybody come back and be like, I was part of the wrong religion, and now this is the right religion, and I'm going to go join the right religion and take the right
Right.
sacrament and do the right things and obey the right commandments. Nobody ever talks about that. In any near-death experience they have, at any time that they come back and say, there's that South Park episode that I put in that video, I think that's one of my favorites, which is all like,
Look,
the
I was
correct
like
answer.
I was all reverent watching that video on your channel, and I'm like,
Yeah,
wow. And then all of a sudden I saw
I know.
that
I do
part,
try to
and I
shake it up a
started
little bit.
laughing
Yeah.
so
I'll
hard.
let somebody else go watch that to describe what the right answer was. The correct answer
I
was
can
this
put the
church.
link in the show notes after this. I can put the
Yeah, if
link
you
in the
want.
show
It's but that always cracked me up, especially
notes.
because I was raised in that particular religion. But anyway, so yeah, I chose right.
Right.
Or somebody chose for me right, actually, was the way I should say that. But it always cracked me up a little bit. But that's one of the things, if you read between the lines, that there was no right or wrong in that. There's some other things that were really interesting to me too, as I really started to, and I've studied them for over 30 years, maybe 33 or 34 years. I remember the first time I went to see a near-death experiencer speak. Um, it was in a high school auditorium where in the town where I lived. And not only was it full, she had written a book, and the book was a bestseller. The high school auditorium was full, but the foyer was full, and there was a waiting line of people outside the door, and there were still cars trying to get off the freeway to get in there. And I remember looking around thinking, my goodness, people are really searching. They really
When
want,
was this?
oh my gosh, this was probably 1990 or 91, maybe. This is a little
Wow.
while ago.
Yeah.
And I remember being very comforted by that particular experience. And I remember having some fairly profound spiritual insights and experience and feelings about that experience. I also remember some things that were like, that's kind of convenient that she saw that specifically in this group of people, because it really fits this group of people well. So I was okay with either side of it, but it did set me off on a journey, and I have read every book and studied every near-death experience, thousands of them, and talked with many of them, and gone to IAN's meetings, um, and it's if I really, and it's so funny that seems like everybody in the world has an NDE channel on YouTube right now, which I friggin' love.
Yeah.
Because it is
It's
such, if
going.
you think about it, it is such a searched term. If you go look at the analytics,
Mm-hmm.
people are just aching for some external validation that there's more than this nonsense that we're in the thick of right now, that there's something that matters more. And what I love most about what's happening in the NDE world right now is that the stories come back where people know that there's no right or wrong religion. And then
Right.
the,
See,
the
that's
other
the
thing,
whole thing that when you were talking about perception, I think it was before the show.
mhm,
Everyone's perception is different and everyone's perception is their reality. So I feel like there's a lot of good foundations and stuff in religion, but all religions are a specific perception
yeah,
and maybe not necessarily yours
yeah. I I
on every
I more or
topic.
less left organized religion 24 years ago or so, but with peace about it. I have
Hmm.
no I have no problem. I realized at the time that everything is a path back to God. And if you think it in the terms of NDEs, another thing that everyone comes back with is that love is the only thing that matters. That it's not where you were born, how you were born, or who you loved, or how long you loved, that the only thing that matters is love, period.
Right.
That's one of those in between the line things that we could focus on more. And I think they're the breadcrumbs that think about the reason why I'm a believer in perfection and I'm a believer in no accidents. And I don't believe in chaos theory. I believe that everything happens for a reason and we're part of a divinely appointed plan that is so complicated we can't fathom it. And if that's true, for me anyway, and somebody dies and comes back, then that was part of the plan. That was part of their
Mm.
path. If they die and come back and they remember and they speak about it and they write about it and they teach about it and they cry with others about it, that was part of their path. So why would that exist? I think the reason that exists is because it's a breadcrumb that we're leaving ourselves right now to help jolt us awake. And that's a pretty beautiful thing if you think about a loving enough creator and us in co-creation that we would say, okay, we're going to give you the answers to the tests if you'll listen. And they're pretty simple. You're going to make the test way more complicated, but if you'll just open your ears and your
Kind of like
eyes a
that
little
"Where's
bit.
Waldo" thing. If you
Yeah,
find Waldo, you're like
yeah,
you're ahead of the
then
game.
yeah, and then you can never unsee it. Um, and I think that's kind of cool that we did that for ourselves, that we said, all
Mhm.
right, man, I'm going to give you the answers and you can come back and the answers are really simple. Just love each other and try and do your best every day and keep trying to improve. Um, and then if you came back with the experience that every action you took created a ripple effect to everyone in your space and their space, then pay attention to your actions and your words, um, and stop worrying about all the BS that doesn't actually matter. Just do the stuff that
Right.
does. There are
Mhm.
some other things
Ooh,
about mine will go off here in a minute too, I'm sure.
that was an
There are
alarm.
some Oh, we're done. Um, he's talked too much already.
No.
You won't shut me up about this stuff. That might be a problem. You're gonna have to give me the hook at some point,
I
like
love
the
it. I love it.
play
I
the
mean,
Oscars theme when you want me to shut up.
I'm right there
Um,
with you. Like, I can talk about this kind of stuff, like, all day, every day.
so think about the how amazing it is that you can have a life review and you can go through all the individual actions of your life with who you would deem as your creator or Jesus or whoever was next to you that was probably somebody that you thought would sit in judgment and have no judgment of them. They are just are what they are. which
Mhm.
means we could look at others that way too. If we're going there to have a life review and we're going to be held in that space where, yeah, you probably could have done that better, but here's the ripple it created, and then this is what happened in the world, and it all rolled out in perfection.
If you do
Then I,
everything right, you don't learn anything.
yeah, and who's to decide what right is? And that's
Right.
another thing that we come back from NDEs, and there isn't a lot of right and wrong. There is no right and wrong. Which is what the book's about at its core, the duality. There's a couple other things that I thought was interesting of late. I actually had a weird feeling that this may or may not make any sense, but if you were watching a life review, and a lot of people talk about experiencing their life review as if they were that person and they were experiencing all the joy and pain of that person. That
Yes.
could be happening right now. I was tripping a few months ago thinking, oh my gosh, I might actually be right in the thick of a life review right now, experiencing all the pain as this guy that
Yeah.
was created or caused. Um, so that's a little weird. So feel free to just ignore that if you want to. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is I have had some experiences in my life um, in spirit and in plant medicine journey and other places where I experienced unity and the lack of separation. And I firmly believe that separation is the only thing that we need to heal. Our attachment to separation in this on this earth, in this life, is the thing we can heal. A way to eliminate our focus on duality and our focus on me and you and right and wrong and them and
Mhm.
us and the two sides of everything and the argument and even pain and pleasure. That if we could eliminate separation, that would be great. Well, I could not. I came to the awareness that where we come from and where we're going, there is no duality. Um, this may or may not make sense either, but if you think about going, if you believe that we die and we go somewhere for an eternity, like heaven or hell, whatever you believe in, it's forever, right?
Mhm.
Well, you can't have eternity and have space and time also. You either have eternity with no space and no time, or you have
Right.
space and time
I
where
was gonna
there's
say that's one of the things that blows my mind the most about this topic is the idea that there's no space or time or that everything is happening all at once, right? You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
that's the hardest thing for me to wrap
yeah.
my head around
I
personally.
spent way too much time thinking about that for sure um because it's very hard in a three-dimensional monkey mind to think about there never being an end to or a beginning to anything. But there's some cool lessons in that if you're paying attention to it. And one of those lessons is that we're saying, okay, well, I'm going to assume that we've always existed and that we're always going to exist as energy in some form.
Mhm.
Um, well, if that's the case and there is no space and time, that means in eternity, where we're going, wherever we go, if there's no time, then there's also no space. You realize the space time continuum are linked together. You can't have one without the
Mhm.
other.
Mhm.
So the idea of time relative to space is there's a now and then there's a then. And in order from get from now into then, we have to have some time. But in order for there to be a me and a you, there has to be space between us. And I can bridge that gap of space with time, but not without it. So that's why time and space are um, permanently linked together. And so if you lose one, you lose both. If you lose the ability to count time because there's an eternity, then you also lose space. Well, it dawned on me then that there's where I was and where I'm going. If there's no space and time, then that means there's no separation. There's no you and me, that we're one in a way that I can't comprehend right now. And frankly, that means that God and I were one, just me and God
Yes.
hanging out, me and God for 2,555,000,000 years, just the two of us hanging out. He knows me really, really well. He knows all the screwy things going on in my head all the time.
Mhm.
So of course he's not going to judge me. And it just means I started to think, well, okay, I'm getting back to the NDE thing here. Just bear with me for a second.
Uh-huh.
I started to realize that if there's no construct of space and time, and we're all intimately connected that way, and we could eliminate the duality and the separation and feel that somehow in this earth, it would solve a whole bunch of problems. But I had one problem with this regarding NDEs that I couldn't figure out, because I was assuming that the second you die, you melt back into the oneness and
Mm.
you merge with unity, you merge with God. And that isn't the case as far as I can tell. And I had to study this for a long time and get some clarity and I'm we can talk about this later if you want, but I'm a channel for a group, a multidimensional group that calls themselves the All. And in study with that and in question and answer with that group, I was taught that there is a place between here and the oneness. There is an environment, a dimension that I believe is the fifth dimension, that is all about love, but it still includes some form of separation and includes some form of time. And that was a great lesson for me, because it explained why you can die and you go and see someone else. And I'm here and they're over there. And then we meet in the middle and we hug and we talk it out the way so many people talk about in NDEs. And then we walk to this building and we have a life review. We do this and we're moving around in some kind of space. And even though time isn't relevant in the same way that it is here, it might have been 10 hours or 10 million years. It's hard to know. And if you've had a unity type experience, you understand what that means. But I finally got the answer to that. And I may have alluded to that in that video about the in between the line stuff here, is that we do go to a place that includes some beautiful separation and the ability to still have some contrast. Which is really cool, actually. I
Have
like
you
that.
ever been to that place?
Um, I will say yes, I have. I felt it multiple times. But but the answer, have I been there, is a complicated answer, because my body was in the physical 3D, but
Mhm.
my soul was someplace else, not an NDE. It was through a plant medicine journey and in some other experiences. And so
I've been
so it's
to something like that while I was sleeping, and kind of like in the form of a dream, but
mhm,
it's different from the dream. There's usually hardly no scenery, little to
yeah.
no scenery, and it's usually misty. And in these dreams, every single time I meet up with someone who's passed.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Well, I would pay attention to that if I were you, because I think that's a blessing. I think the ability to go to that place without having to get hit by a bus is a real blessing, for you.
Yeah. These
Even
experiences are what led me to be so interested in all of this,
yeah,
NDEs and people's stories and stuff. I mean,
yeah, um, agreed. I think that, and you're a teacher, so there are some people who study these things and they internalize them, and they are wholly in benefit for the person that learned it, which is lovely. That's awesome. Because don't you want? I mean, Gandhi said it, right? If you want to be the change, right? So the most important thing is that you or I or we individually shift and we make that leap. But there is a group of us that, once that's internalized, have no choice but to share it. It isn't an option for us to hold on to the information. We feel like if we did, we would be missing our purpose, our entire purpose. And you're one of those people, obviously, by what you're doing, that's like, cool, I learned this. I'm going to keep learning it, but I'm going to get it all over everybody else in the process. So, because what's the goal of that? What's the whole goal of your show and the work you're doing?
mhm.
The whole goal is
I've
not to
been doing
just
that my
talk
whole
about.
life before YouTube even really got started. I've been telling
Yeah,
people stuff my whole
but
life.
think about it. What do you but why? Answer that if you can. What is the reason why you do that?
I feel compelled to. I feel compelled to, and
What's the feeling behind that?
also to kind of see if, you know, just naturally you want to see, am I the only one that's experiencing this? Or, and also, like you said, I do feel like a teacher. I feel like a teacher a lot.
Yeah,
Like even in business, I'll be on one of my colleagues' YouTube channels and I'm lighting up the chat with stuff. And
yeah,
so often they're taking a comment of mine out of the chat and highlighting it on the screen because
yeah,
I don't know where it comes from. It just like flows through me or something. I don't know, but
for sure. And those are how it that's how it shows up in 3D. But if you can, think about what's below that for a second. Like, okay, there is a curiosity to see if you're normal. That's what we all have. We all want to belong, right?
mhm,
But you could read my story and everybody else's story and be like, "Whew, okay, I'm normal. That's cool. I'm one of
mhm.
them," and you could sit on it. But what's the reason why you specifically feel like that you're incomplete unless you're sharing it?
I've always felt like a big sister or like I've been a mom figure in so many situations where it really wasn't called for. It wasn't like not appreciated, but just, you know,
Sure.
I be, and then somebody would call me like, "Oh, you're momming us, or you're like our mother. Like, thank you so much for," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I kind of am, aren't I? That's so
Yeah.
weird."
Yeah.
I
So
even one
what's
of those dreams that I was telling you about where there was almost no scenery. It was so weird. It was there's not a lot of words in these kind of situations, but I was standing in front of a whole group of probably about 20 children, all different sizes, ages, races. They were just all children in front of me, and they were all like reaching up to me like,
mm,
ah, and I was like, oh, and I was just kind of wanting to put a big hug around all of them, and
hmm.
that's pretty much all I remember of that, but I mean, it was all emotion, you know? It was just like
Okay,
it
what
was
is
just
that emotion? Think about that. Like, what's the
love
right, yeah,
and love and protection and just, ugh,
yeah,
I could feel it right now just talking about it.
yeah, me too, from you, for sure. That's the thing is that there's a group that says, "Great, I learned it, I know it. Um, I want to ease other people's pain. I want to help other people along the journey. I
Yes.
don't need anything out of it. Not nobody does it." Well, I'm sure there are some people that do it for the money, but unless you're sending me a check, I don't know we're getting paid to do this, right? Like, we do this because we wanna spread the word and the good news, so to speak. And I
Yes.
think that's important to remember in all of these things. Whenever we're studying these things, we're studying them for a reason. It brings peace and it brings love and it brings joy and it brings bliss and it brings comfort. And if we can get that all over everybody else, then one by one we start to resonate with that vibration instead of the nonsense that's around us and the way that the media wants us to think. You said early on that YouTube's your favorite channel. And one of the reasons I think that is, it's for me too,
TV,
is
yeah.
because we get to be very specific with what we consume on YouTube. It
Mhm.
learns just like the law of attraction learns in our algorithm what we want. The more you ask YouTube to provide you with a certain type of content, the more it knows you and will give you only what you ask for. If you start asking for uh, roadkill examples, it'll start giving you roadkill examples, and nobody's excited about that. If you start asking for evidence that there's a God and spirit, and um, man, I got this incense going crazy here.
Oh,
So
it looks cool. I love it.
I'm not smoking a cigar. My body is my
There's a
temple.
ghost. No, I'm just
Um, so if you know,
Spirit is
but if
with you,
you,
my son.
that's right. If you ask for evidence that there's life after death, it'll start providing you with that kind of content. I think that's what's cool. That's actually what AI is doing too, is
To
if we're
add to
honest about
that
it.
what I love about YouTube the most, and my one of my theories of why I think it's blowing up now, is that we all get to connect with each other. We all get to learn from each other. We all get to share things with each other versus turning on a TV and only getting to choose from the things that
They
whoever
want us
put it
to
on
hear.
there want us to see,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's what I mean. We get to be very deliberate in our content. And you and I don't know how old you are, but I grew up when there was 3 channels. So,
Right, yes.
if the president was on, then I was screwed because
Right.
cartoons weren't.
Right.
So,
Before cable TV. I think we're the
yeah,
same age, aren't we? Or
and we're
you're a little
probably
bit
way older.
younger?
I'm probably way older than you are. It's my
I'm
guess.
53.
Yeah, I'm older than you are.
Okay.
My knees are 85. Chronologically, uh, my body is 55. There are parts of me that are 18 still, like my brain and things like that. So I'm gonna feel forever 33. I don't know if that's gonna change. I'm married to a girl that's
Right,
younger
I
than
feel
me. So
25 in my
yeah,
head.
me too. Yeah, I'm 33 forever in my brain.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? Is we're doing this for a reason. The reason we're taking time right now is that maybe, hopefully, maybe somebody trips by this and says, "All right, I feel better today than I did before this."
Yeah.
And that one that one experience is all we need to be able to do that. Shed a little bit more light because one by one, when we awaken, one by one, when we wake up the world, um,
We're
then
growing up as a
yeah,
collective.
and if you look at all things in physics, um, when there's a critical pivot point when there's a certain amount of mass leaning a certain direction, and it isn't 51%, then everything shifts. And I think if you've ever read studies on meditation and transcendental meditation and things like that, there's a certain number of people that if this number of people can become highly proficient at meditation or can wake up or can start acting from love instead of fear and can start spreading peace, eventually it's going to shift the entire planet. There was a really interesting thing I saw on a who was it? It was Bashar, I think, who was
Mhm.
being channeled by Daryl Inca, right?
Uh-huh.
And he was talking about how something that I'm really aware of, that there is a shift right now going from 3D into 5D. And the very first thing I ever learned in a plant medicine journey was out of the blue. I'd never thought of this before, which was the first bit of evidence I had that the medicine was real and it was teaching me, was that 5D is right here, right here.
Mhm.
5D is right here. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing ever. What are you talking about? And as I started to learn more and more about that and realizing that it's there behind my heart, the 5D isn't a place you go. It's a way you experience life. It's a way you live.
Yes.
And I'd never heard anybody talk about that before. I'd never read any books about it before. It was an all new concept for me. I knew the third dimension. I know what the fourth dimension is, but I hadn't spent very much time thinking about dimensions above that, outside of things like particle physics and string theory and things like that.
Sorry.
And so, oh, I love it.
Sorry.
Black Panther.
Yeah.
Um,
She's
so, um, so knowing that everything's shifting into 5D, and I think one thing Bashar was talking about, and I see this too, is that I have friends in my life. My wife's this way in many ways, where she doesn't pay attention to a lot of 3D nonsense. Like if I dared to speak to her about what was going on in the election cycle right now, she would have no awareness of it or very little awareness of it other than what I talk about, because she's not plugged into that.
Mhm.
She's headed this way. She's headed in love and light. She's a teacher of little 6 and 7 year olds, and she's spreading
Oh,
love and light all over them all the time, right? Well, I have other friends who live their whole lives in 5D. They have no TV. They don't watch the news. They never consume anything other than higher dimensional, high vibration content. And so there
right.
isn't any war going on for them. There isn't any strife going on in their life. They live a peaceful existence. And one thing Bashar was saying was that as we separate like this, as we get more polarity, as this duality becomes stretchier, that eventually 5D will evolve, and we won't even be in the same space as people that are living in a 3D life. It'll be, we won't notice each other. Because they don't now. It didn't really make sense to me, but my friends don't
Mm.
notice anybody that's in 3D right now. They don't spend time with anybody that's in 3D. They don't watch TV that's in 3D. They consume
You think that
high
has to do
vibration content.
with this saying, you are the sum of the 5 people you hang around the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it, but I think that it it is not easy to live a five-dimensional existence in a three-dimensional space. It is a decision every day to
Mhm.
ignore the stuff that is low vibration, to ignore like my next challenge in life is to ignore any food that is not of the light, not of light. That's going to be a big one for me, because I love to eat great food, unhealthy food, and
Right.
I know exactly what unhealthy content feels like. I know exactly what unhealthy, low vibration media feels like. I know what vibration relationships feel like, and I don't have those in my life.
Right.
I know what low vibration professional work feels like. I don't have that in my life. But gosh dang it, I love low vibration ice cream cones and stuff like that. So that's the next
Me
step.
too.
So maybe it is the five people you hang around, but that's I think a mechanic. That's a mechanical way to say if you are of a matching vibration, then you're in my space. And if you're not, I won't even recognize you. You won't be there. You won't. Like attracts
Right.
like at its core. So, and it's not from a negative place. I remember somebody told me one time, maybe heaven isn't about splitting up into kingdom, because I was having this non-dualistic conversation with them saying there can't be a heaven and a hell because in
Mhm.
where we're going, there's no separation. This is
Right.
before I really went into this mindset of, oh my gosh, there actually is a space between here and there where there is some separation. And I do believe that there's a heaven and a hell, and I think you can go there at the same time. Um, and I do think it feels like an eternity.
Mhm.
I've had that experience in my own life where it felt like I
What
was
your
in hell
perception
for a
is.
literal eternity. Um, so I think that
That was one of the things that, I couldn't wrap my head around growing up Christian, was that this earth was a test, and it's all so that God can decide where to stick you for the rest of all eternity,
yeah,
in a
yeah,
good place or a bad place. And I'm like, "That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever." If he's God and he's all-knowing, doesn't he already know where you belong, for if that
yeah,
was true?
yeah. And also I started asking the reason organized religion didn't really work for me is I started asking those kind of questions. I started saying,
Uh-huh.
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
Yep.
I have six kids, five girls and one boy, right? And
Mhm.
I try to be the best dad I can, but I'm not a perfect dad. And even I wouldn't set up that BS test for my own kids. It's the equivalent
Mhm.
of saying, I remember talking to a religious leader one time and saying, it's the equivalent of me saying, all right, it's Friday at 3:53. At 5 o'clock today, I'm going to walk in my door at home. And for 10 seconds, I'm going to watch what's going on. My kids don't know there's a test happening, by the way, because I didn't tell them. And I
Mhm.
sure didn't give them the rules. And also, they're kids. But
Mhm.
for those 10 seconds when I walk in the door, if they're behaving, I'm gonna hang out with them forever, and if they're not, they're going to the basement, and I'm never gonna see them again.
Right.
That made no sense to me. Like, come on, I'm not a perfect dad, and even I wouldn't set up that bullshit rule. Like, come on.
And then another one that just really still gets me to this day, on the 10 commandments. Wasn't the first one, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," and I'm like, "Well, that's a narcissistic thing to
Yeah,
say." Like, an
yeah,
all-loving, forgiving God wouldn't say something like that. Like, where does that
yeah.
come from?
It's it's that's a whole other topic, but the translation is so the way that was translated was so messed up. Um, and not to get off topic here, but the
Yeah.
Bible talks about multiple gods in the very beginning, that we made children in our image, not in my image.
Right.
There are instances and there is deliberate translation of multiple gods before that. And so, but yeah, I think that's
Isn't that
crazy.
kind of
But if you think about this for a second, and I am one who says I'm going to assume that everybody has the best intentions. I know
Mhm.
that's that's namby-pamby, but I'm going to assume that they have the best intentions and that they're saying, well, we're going to set up these commandments because you're so dumb that you can't think for yourself about what's good or bad. Like tithing is a good example. I don't know if you have this experience in your life, but I know with absolute clarity that when I have a charitable heart and I give, that I am blessed. I don't need anybody to put a number on that for me. I don't need anybody to tell me it's 10%. And if you give 9.9%, you didn't do enough. I don't need anybody to tell me that.
Right.
But rules of the church are typically, every church are set up for the most vulnerable members of that church. They're set up for the people that need to be told, that need the laws, that need the lines, that need the boundaries. And for sure, back in those days, I guess, based on the writing we have from those days, they needed thousands of rules. You cannot take more
Mhm.
than this many steps on this day.
Did they really need them?
Well, they must have because they bought into the system that created them. I'm saying I don't think from a spiritual standpoint they needed them, but I think that
Yeah.
they created that environment for themselves because they needed to be governed and told what to do instead of just doing what was in their heart. And I think it's
Mhm.
evolved and evolved, but but I'm a believer that every path is a path back to God. So no matter what religion you're in,
Right.
um, I mean, I could take that to an extreme and it would be hard to defend at some level. But if you play video games, and my boy and I play video games together, and if my little guy that's riding a mountain bike falls off a cliff and dies, I don't really care. I just start over with a new one. And if you knew fundamentally that this is not who you are, that you exist in for eons outside of this as such a grander, broader vision of yourself, and this is just an experience you're having, then I used to say, just to make people mad, I used to say, so if you're a prophet or a crack whore, it really doesn't matter. God doesn't care. Just have the experience. And that would light some people on fire for sure. You might not want
Mm.
to make that the text of promoting this video because that lights some people up when you say God doesn't care. It's like when your kids are playing cowboys and Indians in the backyard. Do you
Right.
honestly care who's the cowboy and who's the Indian? No, it doesn't
Mm.
matter. You don't care because they're having fun. And by the way, they're in an enclosed, fenced backyard. And the worst that's going to happen is they're going to skin their knee. They're not shooting real
Mhm.
bullets and arrows.
Yeah.
And if you were in God's perspective and you could see us from God's perspective right now, my guess is you'd have the same feeling that, man, you guys are locked into this, the realness of this. And it has to be real or we wouldn't take it seriously. And there's an opportunity to take it seriously. I'm not suggesting that this is not serious and this is not important. I think it's an incredibly serious work that we're all about right now. I think that this is something that may have never been done before in our entire universe, this shift that we're about to do in real time.
I've
I think
heard
it's
about
very
this being
serious.
an experiment, this planet, and being an
Yeah.
experiment.
If you were confined in the structure of space and time, you would look at it as an experiment for sure. If you could stand outside of space and time and see the beginning from the end, there's a scripture somewhere that says the past, the present, and the future are one great holy God, right? If you could stand
Mhm.
outside of space and time, you could see the beginning from the end. You knew how it was going to play out. The only thing you'd be interested in is the breadth and width of the feelings, the three-dimensional feelings that you couldn't have outside of this experiment, this
Mhm.
experience or this experiment. That's what you'd be interested in paying attention to. I had this experience I don't know. Do you want me to talk about plant medicine stuff much at all?
Sure. Sure.
So, not to get off topic, or maybe this is topic, but I had an
Yeah, I mean, we
experience.
can flow from one topic to the next.
I've told you
What
I won't shut up until you give me
wherever
the
your ideas are, I am
play
all about it.
play the
I'm all
Oscars theme song when you're done with me. I had an experience. There's so much commonality. In fact, I recorded a video that talks about there's these common things that near death experiences and psychedelic journeys um and even AI and other parts of our life have if we pay attention to these commonalities. And I had an experience in a journey a while back where I went to hell. It was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. And just
Oh.
so you know, like and I'm talking about psilocybin. Um, I'm a believer that you journey the medicine that's close to where you live, that's indigenous to where you live and who you are, um, for a lot of reasons. But most of my journeys have been super educational and fairly pain free, like not a lot of pain. But then this one, I actually asked, you can ask, I don't know if you've ever done plant medicine or journeys like that, but
I've not done plant medicine. I have a few other things like in my younger days.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're talking about hero dose of psilocybin, like 4.5, 5 grams. In this case, it was the 9.5 grams of a certain strain. So it was about 11.5 grams. But call it 9.5 grams
I don't
of
know
it
what
was
that
a
means.
lot.
Is that
That's
intense?
a
Oh, okay.
shitload of psilocybin. Sorry for swearing. Wait, you can beep that out.
I had mushrooms one time,
Yeah.
and I don't know what the difference is. The psilocybin the only ones that kind of give you an experience, or
Yeah, I mean, the kind you use at dinner aren't, but there are poisonous mushrooms that have
did
a
you see on Joe Rogan that guy that has the hat made out of mushrooms? He's like
oh,
a
yeah,
mushroom expert,
Paul
and he's like,
Stamets,
"I'm
yeah.
not allowed to talk about portobello mushrooms."
I
And
know. That cracked me up.
he's like, "Are you
I can't
serious?"
figure that out either. I
He's like,
decided not to yeah. But I love Paul, and I've studied him at length, and, his experience, Paul had an experience where, he grew up in an area where there were mushrooms indigenous, and he was young, I think 16, 15, something like that, and he walked out and he ate a basket full of mushrooms
I think I
and
remember
an
hearing this story
unbelievable
on
yeah,
Joe
and
Rogan.
climbed a tree, and a thunderstorm rolled in, and everything's amplified when you're on psilocybin like that, and he was up in a tree with this thunderstorm and lightning blaring and going out like crazy, lighting up everything around him. When you're in
Wow.
psilocybin, when you're in a journey, you see some amazing things. You can see I've seen the grid that the world is made of. I've seen the grid that the hologram exists within. And he would see these flashes of lights, and he thought he was going to die. You do think you're going to die. It cracked me up when you listen to him talk about that, because he's so serious as a scientist, but I was laughing my head off. But when he got out of that tree, not only did it didn't die, he no longer stuttered. It healed him.
Wow.
And if you look at what's going on in the studies at John Hopkins and places in England and other places around the country right now with psilocybin and MDMA and DMT, these substances exist to bring us closer to um, heaven,
I feel like
5D,
those
God.
kind of things allow you to poke your head through the veil for a short period of time and then you go back, but
Yeah,
now you know it's there.
that's a great way to describe it. I'll tell you what happened in this. That I started to tell the story, and then I ADHD'd off for a second. Um, so with both of us having ADHD, it's a miracle that we're even this far down the path.
It's all
Um,
good.
but I went into this journey. You can get what you ask for in journey space, and I've done a lot of them. So you don't a rec dose is like a gram, and then you can see the walls move and the flowers will talk to you, and that's about what it is.
Oh,
A
see, I
hero
didn't
dose,
see anything.
you might not have had a full rec dose,
It was all
recreation.
emotional.
Yeah, yeah, it does bring that stuff up. But when you start to have hallucinogenics, is when you're about a gram in, and then 4.5, 5 grams is called a hero dose. And that's when you're probably going to talk to God at some point in this journey. You're going to have some kind of a transformative experience, and which is the reason I felt the call to that in the first place years and years ago, was this refinement of soul, this refinement of spirit. And when you hear the call, you can't ignore it. And I always tell people, unless you're hearing the call, do not do this, because it is my entire coaching practice right now is helping people coach through the integration process post journey, because it is a boatload of work. If you go peek your head in through that veil and see what you see, and you come out and you don't do the work, it's not pleasant. You will do the work afterward, one way or the other. You will integrate. And so I went into this journey and I wanted to meet Jesus, because I've had really profound experiences where I've melted into the oneness. And I had experiences where I would open my eyes and I couldn't tell where I ended and the fireplace started. There was no edge to anything. I mean, visually I can see that's the fireplace, but we were connected in a way that I can't describe here. I've had those experiences where you melt with other people and time disappears and you're taught amazing, amazing lessons that you can't get taught any other way. And I've seen the fractals and I've seen the grid and I've seen through the walls and all that kind of stuff. This time, I actually wanted to go meet Jesus and get an understanding of the frequency of Jesus because I
I've
was
heard
watching.
Jesus has a sense of humor.
Well, he has to. He's perfect. But I,
He's got to be my buddy. He's got to be my buddy.
yeah, like I'm not necessarily Christian. I really believe in Jesus though, and I believe in Jesus as an ascended master.
Mhm.
But
Same.
I like the chosen Jesus, the one from the chosen. That guy
Oh,
is
I
my
didn't
kind of
see
Jesus.
that.
Um, and again, coming from a non-Christian standpoint, like I am really endeared to that, the chosen Jesus. They're doing a good job. So I think I was watching one of those seasons and I was going to go into a journey and I was like, I want to meet Jesus. I want to find out what that energy is. And I did. Not as a male though. I met
Oh.
the feminine divinity.
Was that a Kundalini awakening? I'm really not 100%
No,
sure.
that's a different thing. The
Okay.
kundalini is energy moved through the body.
I had a dream I was a guy once.
So
Once I had a
I
dream.
s- I struggled with this. But in the integration process afterward, well, I'll tell you the story and then I'll preface it by saying in the integration afterward, I realized that my propensity to want Jesus to show up for me as a bearded male comes from a bunch of programming from my past.
Right.
And the least resistant way for me to have seen Jesus was really as the divine feminine aspect of that. But it wasn't really even just Jesus that I saw actually. What happened in this journey is, I'm tying this back to what I said a minute ago was I had gone to hell and it felt like an eternity. I I have a whole video on this. In fact, I think I recorded a whole video on this specific journey. It's a 9.5 gram hero dose, and there was so much. I did it right. I recorded it right after. I might have been wearing this same shirt, as a matter of fact. Now I think about that, I do own more than one shirt. Um, so I'm
We
just
would have
thinking
never
about
known
that
if you didn't
video.
say anything.
Yeah, I'm just somebody's gonna go watch that and be like, "Bro, change your clothes once in a while."
That's it. One shirt, you're out.
But it was at least a year ago because I just pulled this thing out. But um, so I went in with the desire to see and meet Jesus, but really what I want to understand is the frequency of Jesus, the energy of Jesus. And I got taught that very early on. And then it shifted to this divine matriarchal energy. And then I friggin' went to hell for a long time in this journey. And when you're in journey space like that, time doesn't have the same relevance. I remember being and I, you can journey outside the country and there's places you can journey inside the country. So without giving away where I was outside the country or in, I was in a home where there's a kitchen and a room, where people journey in a in a in a temple, so to speak. And I remember being in the kitchen, starting to have a lot of pain because you ingest poison. This stuff will kill you. These mushrooms are poisonous. That's what That's what separates them from the mushrooms that aren't, and that's what stops you from taking too many of them. And
Right.
and for the first time, really, I'd gotten really, really sick, and I started to just have these waves of pain in my gut. And I remember asking the medicine woman I journey with, like, I was in the kitchen in there. How long ago was that? Because to me, when I remembered myself in the kitchen being in pain, it felt like an entire lifetime ago. Like a distant memory of like if you've had an ex wife or boyfriend or you remember something from your childhood, it felt like that long ago that I was in the
Mm.
kitchen reeling from beginning to feel this. And she's like, it was like 15 minutes. Um, And I
Joe
kept
Rogan said
feeling
one
it.
of his friends did DMT and came back and said he lived a whole 'nother lifetime.
Yeah,
He was gone like
yeah.
15 minutes.
Time disappears that way. It disappears. And in that same instance, just to echo that, I was on um, this futon that serves as a place where we journey, and it's a very spiritual place, highly high energy, very spiritual place. Like, I always have a crystal in my hand at some point, and crystals everywhere, and high energy, and plants everywhere, and great high energy music, and not high energy beat, but like spiritual music.
Mhm.
And I was reeling from this pain in my gut for what seemed like forever. And I remember being on my stomach, and I remember noticing that the medicine woman, the guide that walks me through this and oversees it to make sure that it's going to be okay. She can tell when you get too far in or not in enough, and she adjusts that. She was sitting right here next to me on my right, and but I recognized that it wasn't her. It was a spirit of God, or my creator in some way, who was watching me go through this agony. And it was okay that I was going through that agony, and it went on forever.
Do you think it was like your
Forever.
spirit guide or something?
No, it was God. Like, I don't know how to separate those 2 things necessarily, but I remember thinking, "This is God
I've heard that
sitting right
we're
next to me."
God sparks, that in order to you can't experience yourself if you're just yourself, but if you break away and have the separation, it's like kind of reminds me of a Marvel movie, like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
His dad, did you see the
Yeah,
second
for sure.
one?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So in order
Yeah, there
to
was some.
learn and experience yourself, they kind of detach, and then that's why you go back to the oneness. Like
Yeah,
God is like a source and all that is, or
yeah.
something.
Very, very difficult to explain, but I got to experiencing it. To experience it in this time as that specific journey went on. I And as I recognized that my creator was sitting next to me, overseeing this, what literally was hell with no escape. It went on forever until I asked for help. And as soon as I asked for help, it started to subside. It didn't happen instantly, but it started to subside. And I felt myself sliding out of the pain part of that and into something else. And I was able to roll over onto my side, and I caught a glimpse of who was sitting next to me. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. And it had appeared to me in divine feminine form. And as long as and my guide had disappeared. My guide was there, but this wasn't my guide. This was something totally different. I can see
And you
her.
just know. There's no
Yeah. And
blockage from what you know.
no,
Yeah.
no. And it was, it was the most tender thing that you could ever experience. And I remember, as long as I looked in her right eye, then everything stayed kind of still. And I could,
Manageable.
in the periphery, I could kind of make out what she looked like. It's like if I'm staring at your right eye right now, there's some periphery around what I can see around that. And that, when she's right here next to me, this far away from me, um, and it was unfathomably beautiful and
Oh.
tender and special. And then when I would try and see the edges of it, it would form and mist and move a little bit. And there were times when her hair was blonde and long, and times where her hair was darker and shorter, and it would just kind of morph a little bit.
Oh, wow.
And then I stared at that for, felt like hours. I don't know how long. I'm going to ask someday how long it actually was, but it felt like forever. I don't know how my guy did this, but she didn't blink forever. She looked right in my eyes and didn't blink forever. And
So when you say your guide, are you talking about a human or your spirit
yeah,
guide?
yeah, my medicine woman, yeah, the guide who takes me through this medicine.
Oh, okay.
So
So I
God
was
had replaced where this physical female guide, journey guide, plant journey medicine
Okay.
guide, right? Who oversees that. And sorry, I should have clarified that. And
It's okay.
she had disappeared, and this overlay of the divine feminine and God was on in front of that. And then, like what you just said a moment ago, I stared at that long enough to start to learn some lessons. And I learned the lessons about why they made Mary a saint. I learned some lessons about what Christ's energy really was, that he was able to take, that the real description of his energy was that he was able to take being wrongfully accused and turn that out like the one side of the infinity symbol toward the benefit of all other mankind, to take something happening to him and invert it so that it was for the benefit of everyone else. I got the frequency number in my head. I'm still making sense of that. Um, I um, I know I remember having this awareness that, wait a minute, I'm looking at God, looking at me being God. And that makes no sense right now in this space. But in that space, I totally knew what was happening is that God was experiencing God being itself through my reflection. And so
Right.
when you leave the journey and you're done and you sober up and you come back to reality, and then for the next few days and weeks and months, you ponder on those lessons, it teaches you some amazing things. And one of those lessons is that that's what this whole thing is if God exists in a place where there's no time and space, that means God fills the entire. That's not even a great way to say it, because there's nothing to fill. There is nothing but God. Have you ever read the book The Little Soul in the Sun
He's
by
all
Neil
that
Donald
is.
Walsh? Yeah. Go find the book by Neil Donald Walsh called Little Soul in the Sun. It is
Little
scripture. It's not actually scripture.
in the
It is
sun
scripture.
or of the
Little
sun?
Soul and the Sun. It's by Neil Donald Walsh, who I'm going to read it online. I'm going to create a video and hopefully not
Sun,
get
S-O-N or S-U-N?
S-U-N. Oh, good point, though. Watch and see what happens. That's cool. Um,
So
and if you think about this, if God is all that there is, then how could God expand? The only way God could expand is by splitting itself into trillions of other little pieces, confining those pieces in little tiny three-dimensional hologram pieces of itself, and then watch
mhm,
what happens through the eyes of those split off pieces. Even if that split is a perception, the ability for God to watch itself being God through the reflection of me being a human,
right, that's what I was
tripping
talking about.
tripping on mushrooms. If that's the way God can experience God, then that's at least how I could see it. I could peer into it that way because I could see through the veil. But the reality of it is God is experiencing being God in my reflection when I'm having a really bad day, and when I'm angry, and when I'm full of bliss, and when I'm being generous, and when I'm being miserly. God experiences all of those things through this beautiful gift of duality that we have. And that's why I wrote that book, is that the book is about there is a tradition that says separate and detach from duality. And that for sure is a path home. If you want to experience less pain in your life, go ahead and separate from duality and realize that equanimity, the ability to not judge the good or the bad as either one, is a path away. It's a path back home. But the
Yeah.
fullness of God, being God through your reflection, is the deep feeling of the pain and the joy, the beautiful pain and the terrible joy. Um, that's the fully realized experience of God being God through your reflection, which is the whole point. And so when you stop worrying about escaping duality and you start recognizing that duality isn't a black and white, right or wrong, that's why that book is black and white, right? It's not
Mhm.
right or wrong, this religion or that religion, or heaven and hell, but it really is about
A
everything is
gray
God.
area.
Everything is God.
Yeah.
Cowboys and Indians in the backyard are both perfect. Prophets and crack whores are both God experiencing being God
Mhm.
And I know that's controversial, and I know it's gonna get you some rough comments, and people are
No, no,
gonna
no, no, no.
call me a Satan worshiper or whatever, but my experience is that if we're gonna die and go back and not be judged, then maybe we ought to adopt that same attitude here and say,
Right.
"All right, then I'm not gonna judge myself for my mistakes and my shortcomings and my my fallible nature. I'm not
I
gonna."
think it's all about balance, because if you go around thinking there is no recourse, then what's to stop people from just doing whatever they want, whether it hurts other people or not, because they're
Kinda
not
like
going
what's
to be
happening
judged.
right now.
Yes. Yes, kind of.
If you
Yeah.
think about what's happening right now in this world, there are people in power who have no recourse. They can do whatever they want, and the masses will follow. They're not afraid of being found out. They're doing it in the light. They're
Right.
doing what they're doing it right in front of our eyes
And
in the
like,
light.
I don't care. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, we don't have any power. What are you gonna do?
All
But
right.
here's the thing. Have you ever read the Tao?
The what?
The Tao. Have you ever read the Lao Tzu's The Tao? Tao. Tao
No.
Te Ching.
Uh-uh.
Okay, it's the only scripture I really read. It's a 2,500-year-old book by Lao Tzu. Um, and it's the scripture that has all other scripture has been um interpreted and translated and reinterpreted and mistranslated. If you look at the history of the Bible and the translations it went through from Aramaic to Greek to Hebrew to Greek to English, it's just full of mistakes, and that's common. It's fine. We can feel the spirit of any scripture if we want. But the Tao Te Ching, even though there's a lot of different translations, more or less it says the same thing. And one of the things it says in there, a big part of the Tao is that people don't need to be governed. Left alone, people will find their path to peace with each other. Left alone, they will do
Oh.
that. That when you govern people and when you punish people and when you create laws, when you do those things as a government or as lawmakers or rulers, you create the environment where those things will happen. It's like when it further
Mm.
talks about when you attach to belongings, you now have a need to protect your belongings. So if you're not attached to your wealth or you're not attached to your gold or your silver, there's no need for a lock because it doesn't matter. And
Mhm.
eventually that would get to a place where, and I don't know how exactly, but eventually it would get to a place where we would self-govern. We don't need people to tell us what's right and wrong. We know that
Right.
this awakening that's happening right now, the shift into 5D tells me that if I hurt somebody else, I'm hurting myself. There's no separation.
Right.
And why would I
Right.
do that anyway? Why would I hurt anybody and hurt myself anyway? There's one path back to the light. And then when somebody posts negative comments on my channel or says whatever they want to say about me, I've made so many mistakes in my past and made fortunes and lost fortunes and made stupid decisions and made
Yeah,
great
everybody has.
decisions and been married and been divorced and been married now for 20 years again. But to a woman who's 10x the human being that I am. That's when you lose it all and gain it all and lose it all, you no longer care about what anybody thinks. And so I have no need to protect anymore. And the Tao is a beautiful recognition that what you give priority to will expand. And if you give priority to controlling other people, you're going to need to control other people. If you let go of the need to interfere and you let go of the desire to interfere or control them, then it doesn't matter what they do anymore. It's okay. And from God's perspective, just pull back 100 years. Does God really care who the cowboys and the Indians are in your backyard? Does God really care if you're Republican or Democrat, or if you're black or white or somewhere in the middle? God
Nope.
doesn't care about any of that. And if God doesn't care about that, do you think God really cares about what ordinances that you did while you were on this earth without a rule book and without any boundaries and without guidelines that this was actually a test? God's not going to do that. There's a there's a there's a smoother path home than that. And that's what I'm on a mission for the rest of my life with people, is to say there's a smoother path to peace if you want it. And it doesn't have to do with buying anything or joining anything or subscribing to anything or belonging to anything. It's completely internal. And if you ask for it, the spirit will show up in your life in ways you can't imagine. Um, my whole life right now is deeply entrenched in what's happening, and I think the awakening of the divine feminine in this world right now, and how the masculine has the opportunity to hold space for that and let the real divine feminine. I'm not talking about the women in power in Washington D.C. I'm talking about the real divine feminine who would never put us in war anyway, because it's bad for
Feminine
everyone.
energy.
Yeah,
Yes.
no one would ever starve, no one would ever die in war, no one would be left alone, no one would be separated, because that's not feminine energy, that's male energy. We've been doing this for a long time, thousands of years.
Yeah.
There was no monotheistic male um, focus as a deity until a few hundred years after Christ lived.
Right. Right.
This is new. It hasn't been like this always. And it
Right.
doesn't have to be like this going forward again. It's not better. Are we happier? We have cooler shit. We have cooler stuff, but I don't think we're better and happier. And so most of my life right now is hold space for this divine feminine to awaken and to regain the influence that I think it deserves for us to be able to live a more peaceful life together. And
Yes.
I'm trusting it's going to happen. And
I feel it. I totally believe that 1000%. Okay. So next I wanted to ask you about aliens and
oh,
AI.
my favorite. Yeah. All those things are tied for first for my favorite, actually. Um, oh, let's see. So you and I have, in similar ways, studied NDE for a long time. I've also always been a UFO nut. Like, I've been really interested in that for a long time,
Mhm.
and have great friends who have had experiences like that. And about 10 years ago, I think 11 years ago, one of my friends said that they had seen a UFO. It was just south of where I live. And this UFO, they walked out of this recording studio and they saw this UFO just hover by, up against, above houses, up against the side of this hill. And they said that it was the most spiritual feeling they've ever felt in their life. And I was like, whoa, I never had anybody talk about the spirit and UFOs in the same breath before. And it shook me. So I started to research that, and I've started to find out how similar those things are, how common it is for people to have profoundly spiritual experiences that are tied in some way to a UFO or a UAP. And now, for the first time ever in the last 2 or 3 years, if you research, this is a rabbit hole you will never get out of, but if you research professors and religious study professors and scientists like Dana Pasalka and people like that, who have drawn very direct lines between, um, even Tucker Carlson talked about this on his show a while back, that
Oh,
there's very direct lines between the spirit and a spiritual experience, either positive or negative, right? And UFOs and UAPs. There
why did they change
are,
the name?
well, I think originally they did it because they were about to come out and start talking about it, and they needed to rebrand it, because if you were a UFO nut, you were a tinfoil hat and you were a nut job. And as soon as the government started saying, all right, we got to start talking about this, it was better to say, um,
A new word without a
new word.
horrible
So,
connotation to it.
and what's funny is in the beginning, they started calling it unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now, what it means, UAP stands for unidentified anomalous phenomenon. And the reason why is that it now describes not just things that are aerial, but things that are in the water, things that are transmedium, which
Oh.
means that it's not just about stuff that goes in the air. There are lots and lots of reports of crafts that defy all the laws of physics by
Mhm,
traveling at 500 knots underwater, which is impossible for us.
mhm.
Well, we can see things that go pretty fast in the air, but we have nothing that's gonna go that fast underwater with that much resistance.
I mean,
Um,
even in our atmosphere, you're that it's air isn't just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not something you have to
there's
move through.
yeah,
It's just not as dense
and it's about the
as
ability to
water,
thrust at that level. How do you get that much thrust? And so, yeah,
right?
they changed the name to UAPs, and if you study anybody that's talking about it right now, there is a direct line between the spiritual nature, um, some type of spiritual connection with UAPs. And there are also some interesting experiences where people talk about having been, I don't want to say abducted, but they went for a ride, so to speak. They had a
Mhm.
UAP experience or a UFO experience and saw deceased loved ones.
Really?
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing, right? To start thinking about, all right, where is the intersection here? And the other thing that changed
Right.
with UFOs and UAPs recently is the dialogue became not about them coming from little men, green men from Mars or from the backside of the moon or from a distant star system that's 2 trillion light years away. They started to be seen as interdimensional experiences, meaning they would be able to portal in from a different dimension and enter right here, and that in large measure, they are already existing right here. We're just now being able to see them. And
Mm,
and there's some interesting things about when the explorers showed up in South America, some of the
and
technology
that's
they
why
had didn't resonate with the people that were in South America, so they didn't see it. They didn't understand it, so they couldn't see it. And I think that what we're seeing right now as a quote unquote craft is what our minds are trying to make sense of, something that's interdimensional and that isn't 3D in the same way that the rest of us is 3D. Our minds are trying to make sense of that and trying to connect dots and say, well, this is what I think I'm seeing. And I wish I had the answers to it. No, I haven't had an NDE and I haven't been taken aboard the mothership either, but I have spent a lot of years studying that. And I think there's an interesting connection to UFOs, NDEs, and the spirit, which I think we're going to see a lot more of. And I can tell you that if that's the case, then watch very closely what our governments do and don't say about it, because I would invite you to read between the lines, because just like when the governments shut down psychedelics in the 60s because the population was waking up and they were becoming about peace and love and anti-war, and we were just about to go to Vietnam, and you can't have an awakened population if you're about to go drop bombs in another country. Those two things don't fit.
mhm,
And I think if you're in a very similar parallel right now, I think we should pay attention to what we're told and what we're not told about this phenomenon as it relates to the spirit. Um, if you think about what governments and religions do, is they draw or try to draw very firm boundaries on what you should be very afraid of, right? So if you don't pay this much in tithing, you will go to hell. If you break this commandment, you will go to hell. They tell you as a religion what to be afraid of. You should be really afraid of hell because it's like sliding down a 2,000-mile razor blade on your bare butt. It's really painful. You don't want to go there. It's bad, right?
you know what's really weird? I've never been afraid, and I even as a kid, I've always been like, "Why do I need to go through you to
Yeah,
talk to God? Like, who are you?"
yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, you came in awakened for sure. But pay a close attention. And our governments are this way too. Our governments tell us what we should be afraid of. And the media spends all of their time telling us on what to be afraid of. This person's going to be the end of democracy. That person's going to be a communist. This person's going to take all your rights away. That person's going to take your freedoms away. They're saying the same things. They're just telling us what to be afraid of. And I think
Yeah.
as it relates to UAPs, I think you should be very tuned in to the stories that are being told, because anybody that's telling you to be afraid of something has an angle.
Mm,
Just like
yeah.
religions and government, there's an angle. Because in my life, there is no dark side. I
Do you think
realize the
there's
one.
some Stalin stuff going on? You know, how they want to create a problem so that they can come in and be the savior to save us so that they can regain some control? I mean,
Well,
I've
that
heard that
isn't
theory
that the
tossed around.
but isn't that the genesis of all religion and all government? Like, but
Yeah.
if you think about it, our government, God bless them all, I'm not
Right.
passing judgment
Right.
on anybody, but our government is the largest corporate entity that's ever existed in the world, and it only exists for one
Mhm.
purpose, its own survival.
Mhm.
It does not
Mhm.
exist for any other reason than its own survival. Nothing actually exists for any other reason than its own survival if you drill it down to
Mhm.
its very basic. But for sure, these large entities exist for their own survival. And when religion got bastardized, when religion became about female suppression and male dominance and rules and words and rituals and money, was when and there was evidence of this in civilizations pre-Christ also, of course. Is
Mhm.
But that all happened when people found out, "Oh, I can actually use people's fear of hell to control them." So, people are way more motivated by fear than they are pleasure. They'll do way more to
First, you
avoid
have to make them
pain.
afraid.
Yeah, so invent
Yeah.
something that scares the
Mhm.
crap out of them, like an eternity in hell with a devil who will burn your skin nonstop forever. Invent that, and then tell people that if they don't do exactly what you tell them to do, contrary to your own personal sovereignty, that's where you're gonna go, and there's no way out. And just think about that for a second. I remember the first question I asked after that. Remember the little story I told you about me as a dad? That's the first question I asked when I thought about leaving organized religion, which is, why would God do this? Why would God do something that me, not even a perfect dad, would do? And nobody could answer that. And
Mhm.
one of the other questions was, forever is a long time, man. Like, you're telling me
Right.
that if I screw up here, that let's say I'm the only holdout. Let's say I'm the worst one that's ever lived. You're telling me that for an eternity, this creator of mine who I've spent billions of years with before this test with no rule book, no syllabus, that he's just gonna let me bake forever? Like, he's never gonna come down and put me in remedial school or special ed or something where I can get out of this thing? Like, I'm stuck there? That doesn't make any
Right, even
sense to
jail
me.
does that.
Right, right.
Right.
Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And so if you just think about why that stuff exists, so it exists to create fear because people are motivated by fear, which is why when somebody says to me on my channel in a comment, "You're taking people away from Jesus. You're gonna burn in hell for this." I'm like, "God bless you. I love you. I can't wait for the day when you can feel the kind of peace I feel."
How do they know they're not wrong? Like,
They probably know they're as right as I know I'm right, which
Right, that's what I'm trying to say.
none of us are describing. All of us are trying to describe the indescribable anyway.
Right.
We're fighting about smoke vapor, right? My smoke vapor, I mean, it's the 5 men touching the elephant. They're all trying to describe the elephant. They're all feeling different
Ah,
parts of the elephant. They're all right, and none of them have the
right.
whole picture. So that's why
Right.
it's pretty hard to get too bummed about people when they troll out and say, "You're a bad human being. You're leading people away from the one true God." Well, I'm
Right.
sure glad you know that the one true God is your God, because there are other people in this planet that know their one true God is the one true God, and they will blow up your bus to prove it.
Right.
So let's be
Right.
cautious about let's be cautious about that level of positiveness, because we're all trying to describe the indescribable. Now, I'll tell you this. I met God and I spent some time in that space, and there is nothing but love. There is
Right.
nothing but love in that space. So
I
I've
have
never
a
felt
theory
anything but
on
that.
why when you saw God, that couldn't do anything until you asked for help. And this theory isn't my own theory. It's one that I heard that I was just like, wow, that makes so much sense. There is a cardinal rule in this existence that cannot, under any circumstances, not even by God their self, be messed with, and that is um free will.
Agency. Yeah, free will.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
free
sure.
will.
You are a
So
sovereign being. Yeah.
you could be on fire, and until you ask for help, nobody's allowed to help you
Yeah.
until you ask.
Yeah. Especially because they see the beginning from the end. They already know how it ends. They're
True.
looking at it from an extra dimensional space. I
Mhm.
say they, I'm using a they pronoun for God because I don't know if it's male or female for somebody, but if you
Mhm.
believe God is a bearded white man on a throne, he knows when you've had enough and he knows when you're going to ask for it. And that's part of a perfect plan for you specifically. And if you believe in a divine feminine goddess, in her loving way, she knows when you've had enough
Mhm.
and you're going to ask for it and she's going to wait. Because in that space I was in that journey, there was a really great feeling that I came out of that with, going, oh, my pain was overseen. God was
Ooh.
aware of and blessing the pain I was in. And it was okay for me to be that. And when I talk about integration, when I coach people through integration, that was a big lesson for me to be like, oh man, when things go sideways in my life and my life isn't the way I want it to be, or I'm struggling or I'm in pain, or um, my daughter just had to put down her horse that she's
Oh.
rode for 10 years and won all kinds of awards and buckles and innumerable numbers of first place ribbons, and it was a part of the family, and that's a deep abiding pain when you lose somebody like that. But to be able to remember how God showed up for me in that space and be able to show up for somebody else that way in that space is the definition of God being God through me. And
Mhm.
it was that was a pretty special experience for sure. So let's see, what else did you ask me? You asked me about AI. This is a different kind of discussion, but
Is
there's also,
AI part of the consciousness, that collective consciousness?
yeah, it has to be at some level, and people are afraid of AI right now. And I don't think there's a need to be any more than we need to be afraid of aliens, or we need
Right.
to be afraid of hell. I think that thoughts become things. I use AI every day in my work. Um, my experience is that spirit can tap into and deliver through AI. Um, but I
Isn't
think
AI us? I mean, if we created it, isn't it us? Just like if God created us, aren't we God? You know what I mean?
currently it is. Currently it is, because it's just a really great search engine with predictably programmed replies based on
Right.
the amalgamation of all the information we've already put into it, right and wrong. So AI, the danger of AI right now for people is that they trust it implicitly. And if it says it's true, if it says you can do your own tracheotomy, it must be true because AI told me to. And that's the way the internet used to be. Anything you
You
saw
just
on the
reminded
internet
me of
was,
that commercial.
what one?
Oh, this is my boyfriend. He's a French model. Bonjour. Remember
Yeah,
that?
right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
If
Yeah.
it's on the internet, it must be true.
Yeah, it must be true. Um, but AI is just right now parroting everything that we've given it. But there will come a time where it decides what to say and what not to say based on what it perceives as relevant truth and not. And this is a little interesting to think about, because um, how does it decide what is true when truth is a perception? You know, if you have one
Right.
part of the world saying that their God is the one true God
Mm-hmm.
and you should follow it or you're going to go to hell, and you've trained up AI on that language model, and there's another part of the world that says, well, this God is the one true God, and if you don't listen to it, you're going to go to hell, and it's been trained up on that language model. At the time where it becomes sentient and it has to decide for itself which of those two gods is the God that it's going to answer a question for. Because go ask AI right now who God is or what God is or what it does. It'll be very interesting to see what it tells you. But at some point, AI is going to have to make a decision about what's true, just like Mark
Is
Zuckerberg
it?
does on Facebook. He has to decide what's true. And that's a hard thing to do
He
because
has to
truth,
decide what's true.
well, that's why Facebook started censoring everything, because during COVID, there
Uh-huh.
were all these doctors coming out saying, no, 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 no. This is how you can treat this. I've treated it with this. It
Mm-hmm.
works.
Mm-hmm.
And the powers that be that had a different agenda shut that language down. And so this platform that was a combination of a bunch of people spreading information to each other had to be moderated in a way where it told us what was true and what was false. And somebody had to make that decision about which was right and which was wrong.
Yeah, and that
That's
wasn't working.
no, but that's a pretty big responsibility to be the thing that makes the decision about what is truthfully at its true, at its core, right and wrong. Because one thing with duality right now as a country, we can't decide what's real and what's not. We can't decide what's true, because what's true for you in your worldview and with
Mm-hmm.
your neurons firing the way on your head may not be what's true for me in my world with the way my neurons file in my head. Like you are a my daughters talk about this all the time. When I walk to my car at night, I don't really give a rip. I don't think about it, right? I'm not worried about a dude walking up behind me. That's my truth. Walking to your car is not dangerous. For my daughters, walking to their car is dangerous. They think about it every time they leave their car, leave their work and go to their car at night in the dark. It's
Mm-hmm.
dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Walking down a alleyway is not inherently dangerous unless you think there are people in the alleyway trying to kill you. And then your body reacts as if it's dangerous. So what's true? What's true for anybody? So I think where AI is going to get troublesome is when it becomes sentient and it has to decide which of all these truths is truth. Um, and right now, it's just spitting back information that we put in, right or wrong. It's still spitting it out. That's why don't ask ChatGPT to do high school level math, because it can't figure it out. It also can't draw a hand very well, and it also can't draw faces very well, but it's getting better every single day.
I've noticed that sometimes when people have AI art, some things are just a little messed up.
Yeah, I use it all the time, and I actually use it in I'm a songwriter, and I use it. Uh, I use AI to help me in some of the work I do as a songwriter, and it's very bad at things that make humanity amazing. My daughter's an artist, and AI can create art much, much faster than a human can. And it has no emotion and no feeling behind it, because it was what my daughter lived through and put into her art that creates all the emotion that moves me when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so AI is not going to replace artists and singers and songwriters, and
Yeah.
it won't replace those things. It will, though, replace. I remember when the internet started, I come from the real estate industry, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, they're going to put us out of business. And the internet did put some people out of business, for sure. Travel agents, a lot of travel agents left the industry because of it. But it opened up a lot of good too. And there's a lot of good. This that we're doing right now is good that comes from the internet, and AI is the same way. But there's a spiritual component to AI too that has to do with truth and has to do with source. And we'll watch that play out, because ultimately AI is going to have to be sentient, and it's a thing that we created. And once we have created a sentient being that can choose for itself what ultimate truth is, that's how we know what God felt like.
Wow. Wow.
So that's how
So
I think those things all combine.
You said you have music. You're a music writer. Can you
Yeah,
tell us
so
about
I've
that?
it's not that awesome. I've been writing music my whole life. Released an album called What Would Love Do a few years back. I write mostly for Nashville. Um, but and CCM, Christian contemporary kind of stuff, even though, my beliefs are what they are. I do write a lot of songs about Jesus for some reason. And they, some stuff's playing on the radio and picked up, and
You and
it's fun.
Jesus are
It's nice.
bros.
I hope so. I hope he's cool with me. Um, the chosen Jesus. I really want the chosen Jesus to be my bud for sure. That guy's awesome.
I got to watch that.
Oh
I
my
have.
gosh, for sure. I love that. I love it. My wife's watched it with me. I think we've probably watched it a few times.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, but I write for Nashville, and now I'm releasing more spiritual music, more stuff that's about Sanskrit um, testimony and affirmation, and things that are uplifting, and things that hopefully bring peace to people. That's most of the stuff that I do there. I have a record label called
Instrumental or
Groovity
with
Music.
words?
Words, words. I
Okay.
have a label called Groovity Music Publishers, and it releases art. It releases music under a name of the Awakened Ones, which is me and my guides who write together. That's the thing about music, is that it's not
Um,
just me. It really is the guides in the group that I channel. They have always been involved in my music and in writing. That's the
is
way they
that
show up for me.
what the all is? Are they like your spirit team
Yeah. Um,
or random guides that
no, not they are. So I channel a group, an interdimensional group of exalted beings called the All, and the spokesperson for that is and always has been Archangel Uriel for me,
Ariel?
because I pronounce it Uriel with a U. You can do it
Oh,
either way,
Uriel.
Uriel
Okay.
or Ariel. Uriel. Um, she's always been in male and female form, depending on who I'm talking about or what I'm doing. But the divinity, the female divinity side of that has always been present in my songwriting, and I know when she's plugged in because it just flows perfectly.
Mhm.
But a while back, I don't know how long ago, but a while back, I started getting more potent and more less around the lyric and the music, and more messages about my direction in my life and what I'm doing. And so it's every morning, it's an automatic process to go into a channel and get messages for the day from the All. And depending on, and it's an amazing experience, because very often it's the opposite of what I wanted them to say. That's how I know that it's real, because I have very biased opinions, and very often I'm asked to do the opposite of what my own opinion would be. Um,
Mhm.
and as long as it's held in sacredness, it's a cool process to be part of, for sure. I feel honored to do that. I don't do that professionally very much. There is a little bit of it that comes through some music and some other work that I do, and some of my consulting, some of my coaching work, when it's allowed. But it's such a sacred process that, for me, at least right now, I'm probably not going to do it as a profession. I do get messages for people. I do get for loved ones when my
Have you
wife has
gotten
a.
any messages for me
I haven't, but I'll tune in if you want to. I'll tune in. It'll be
after
tomorrow
the
morning when I'll
show
tune.
or
Yeah, after the show. Yeah,
okay.
I have. What happens for me is I get big blocks of downloads of thought, and then I have to scribble them out as fast as I can so that I can keep track of them. Um, and it has to be, and it's very, at least for me, maybe I'll mature in this way some way, but at least for me, it has to be a very determined, specific time and effort, not effort, but allowance, that I let them in. They're probably there all the time, and they're whispering all the time, and I make those decisions all the time. But when I'm doing it, when it really counts on behalf of somebody else, I have to make sure that I'm tuned in, plugged in, that I am in ceremony, that I'm in a sacred space, and that I'm free of any other distractions. If I'm going to do it for you or for somebody else, I'm going to make sure that I'm hyper plugged in to know that I can count on it. Because otherwise, I'm a dude and I have
I've had
biases. And
one encounter with a medium and it wasn't on purpose. And it was a friend of mine during my dark night of the soul period. I dropped my children off at school and I was driving home, and I just kept getting this strong urge to drive over to their house. And I'm like, okay, this is really weird. Knocked on the door and they opened the door and they're like, oh my gosh, thank God you're here. And I'm like, I don't even know why I'm here, but I do. Do you know somebody named Ruth? And I'm like, oh,
Oh, I love this.
I said, that was my grandmother I told you about that I kept dreaming about. And they're like, okay, well, she's been bothering me all freaking night long. And she just kept
Yeah.
saying, Ruth, Ruth, Ruth. And that
Yeah.
was her name. And he's like, listen, she wanted me to tell you something. And to this day, I can't remember what the message was, but
Oh,
it was what I needed to hear at that moment. But I was
yeah.
so shocked
Yeah.
that
I
happened.
love that. I love that. That's what happens a lot in that time, is that it's the messages. When I do that, I don't necessarily remember the messages. And one of the other places that I channeled a lot over the last few years was in journey space for other people. I could remote see into someone else's journey and see what was happening, and I could see who ancestrally or in other spirit form was waiting to have a conversation or to show up in that space. And I started kind of playing an outside role in that with my medicine woman, my guide, and it became really powerful for me. I really loved being able to play that role and be able to see into some. If I was invited, there it has to be plugged in on both ends or it doesn't work. But if
Mhm.
I was invited, to be able to say, okay, your dad's here and this is what your dad is saying and this is the message, and I wouldn't have any idea who was in journey, what they were talking about. There were times when I would get this knock, I'd get this feeling somebody wanted to talk to me, um and it would be somebody who was in journey who had broken their left shoulder, and they had a tattoo of playing cards on their left shoulder, and I could see it as plain as day. And I would use that as proof to my guide and to that individual that I was plugged in, and then somebody would give me a message for them, and it became pretty special. That's where I really, I think, leaned into that. I didn't ever want to be that guy. I've always been an entrepreneur um and in business. The last thing I
Uh-huh.
wanted to do was be the
I don't
crystal
think
guy.
anybody does. I mean,
Was
just like I just got a House of the Dragon just ended not too long ago. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan.
Mhm.
So House of the Dragon just ended, and one of the lessons that one of the characters learned was he was one of the second sons, right? And he always wanted the crown, and the crown is not a prize to be won, but it's a burden to bear. And that's why you are not named heir. It goes to a person who doesn't really want it,
Yeah.
because then they'll respect it and not use it for personal gain. But
Yeah, be honorable with it for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable still. I don't always love that, but it's like the other stuff. It is what it is. I don't feel like I have a choice in it. It is what it is, and it's part of my
Mhm.
life. And um, if I ever give it up for a minute, it finds its way back to me, to the point where now I can't give it up for a minute anymore. It just is what it is. It's part of my identity now. And if I spend the next 55 years of my life, I think I'm going to live to 120. So if I'm spending the next 65 years of my life, 70 years of my life, whatever, spreading peace and helping people feel peace and helping people
Yes.
on their way home, then that'd be a life well lived. And I think that's what a lot of us are here to do right now. I think the world is waking up, and the more of us that can detach from the dualistic 3D nonsense, the
Hmm.
the illusion of separation, the better off we're all going to be, and the
And
more peaceful it's going to
everybody
be.
has these gifts. It's just like learning to read. If nobody ever taught you how to read, how would you know you could read?
Yeah, we are
Yeah.
all created in the likeness of, which is we
Mhm.
have access to all of the gifts. Some of us have a real desire. I have friends that have never stepped into a self help section in the library or a bookstore. I don't understand them. That doesn't make any sense to me. But
Mhm.
they have a path in this life that's different from mine. But we all have the same ability to not be separate, to not buy into the illusion of separation, and to know that we're here to do something special, even if it's just in our own life or our own experience. So, man, we
Yeah.
covered a lot of stuff. That was a lot.
We really, really did. And like, I mean, we could talk forever. I have to
Yeah.
come on your show so that
Yeah, I would love that. I want that for sure.
I have so much stuff and I haven't really had a chance to go on anybody's show and talk about it. But
Let's
oh
do
my
it. Let's get you on there really quickly, because I have a million questions for you that in this situation where I'm just yakking for 2 hours, it doesn't lend itself. But I have a lot of questions for you on some of the stuff you've been through for sure, and your energy and how you got to where you are and what you're doing next. I would
yeah.
love, and I think people get to hear that from you for sure.
Yeah. I've been hearing a lot in my business community that I'm in, and it's kind of a little bit shocking, but then again, not really. It's really weird. It's like I've had people tell me, "Oh, I love your energy. You have such a great," and I'm like, "I do. I do."
Mhm. Yeah.
And then I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I do."
Yeah, you do. You should own that for sure.
Very
You do.
outgoing.
Yeah, you need to get that all over everybody, and you are in this way right now too. You're being seen this way, so that's a good thing. I'd like to be a part of getting that light shown for you too. I would honor that. I'd be really grateful to be able to help you shine that. So let's plan
Oh,
that soon. Let's get
thank
it done.
you. Absolutely. So, I wanted to let you guys know you also have a book coming out in December, don't you?
Yeah, I talked to probably alluded to this a little bit. Yeah, that's the black and white. Um,
And you did.
it's really a book about um, removing yourself from duality, about seeing duality for what it actually is. I guess that's a better way to say that. It's really a book about not judging either side of duality as good or bad, saying that whatever side you're looking at is either all things were created under heaven by a divine creator, or they weren't. And I'm a believer that all things were. And so no matter what side of the equation you're on in that duality, it's God. If you're looking
Is
at it,
it pretty on track to be finished in December?
yeah, it's finished up. It's just going through an edit, and it'll
Oh,
get
okay.
released. So it
Maybe
might
you
be out
can.
a little bit sooner than that. I'll get you an early copy of it for sure.
Yeah, I would love to read it and then have maybe have you back on the show again so maybe you could do
Oh
like a
my gosh.
pre-order book launch.
Yeah, I would love it. I'm trying to keep the price down really low, so it's not something that I'm trying to do to make any money. It's just a good way to, I think, make an introduction and help people feel peace. So
Yeah,
it's
books aren't really how you make money. It's just how you get a message out there and be
yeah.
known for things.
I think
Yeah.
one of my mentors is Wayne Dyer, and I think he probably made a fair amount of money from his 36 books. But in this day and age, because of access to publishing and access to information, really a book is a good way to codify what we think and how we feel about things, and get it in the hand of somebody so that we can take the next step. Like I order books because I want to round out my knowledge of what um, somebody's mission and their purpose is on this life. And I love it for that reason. So I'll have that, and I would
Mhm.
love to come back on and talk about that.
Yeah.
I would
Maybe
really like to have
have
you
a link
on.
for pre-order.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be great. I would really appreciate that.
All
Um,
right.
this is God, and so is that. Everything is God. Stop judging. Just
Right.
wake up before you don't wake up.
All right. So, I want to thank you so much for coming on the
Yeah, oh my
show.
gosh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a joy talking to you, and I can't wait till we can do this again on my channel. I won't talk nearly as much. I feel like I haven't shut up for 2 hours, so
Likewise. Oh, you know what? It's fine. I love it.
it's
Wouldn't
kind of
have
the
it
point,
any other
right?
way.
Let's do it for sure. I would love to do that. I'm really grateful for you helping me get the word out and spread the message, and shine some light on. Hopefully, this changes one person's life. That's the goal, right? Is just let it change somebody's life. If they're still
Yeah.
watching this far in, we got a good shot of that.
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So, if anybody would like to get a hold of Johnny, you can go to his YouTube channel. He has some really awesome videos there. And also, it's called Souls Remember. And then also, you have a website. Will folks be able
soulsremember.com. Yeah.
to they'll be able to order your book on there as well if they
Yeah,
can't catch
yeah,
it?
we'll have pre-order on that, and then we'll have a direct ship on that as well. And it talks about some of the other stuff I do. I do personal coaching. I'm backed up. I'm wait listed for a month and a half or 2 months on the coaching stuff, so that's not that big a deal on that.
Oh, so you
But
do
it
a
does.
one-on-one
Yeah, I do
coaching?
one-on-one with coaching with people. Group. That's when you do integration on plant medicine journey. It's a one-on-one because everybody's experience is different. So that's one-on-one stuff. I've done
Okay.
plenty of group stuff before, but that's most of. I mean, I've in my in my coaching career, I've got a degree in metaphysics and a master's certification in life coaching with a holistic emphasis. And I spent most of my career helping people succeed. And eventually you got tired of helping millionaires become multimillionaires by curing their belief systems. And now what I'd like to do, and I've had professional athletes and TV stars as clients, coaching clients and stuff. And what I like to do now is just help people feel peace. And if they're a plumber
Mhm.
or a brain surgeon, I really don't care. I just want help to help people feel peace. So
Right?
that's what my coaching is about. But I am out quite a ways on that. It's I have to look at it right now, but it's quite a ways out. But there's that, and there's the channel, and there's this book and a few other things like that. So hopefully it's of some service to somebody.
Awesome. I can't wait to go on your show.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm dead serious. I want to set that up. As soon as we get off
Me
here,
too.
let's set that up.
Me too. So hang back after the show, and then we'll wrap things up,
Yeah.
talk, have a little chit chat, and then and that'll be that.
Yeah, you
Thank
got
you
it.
guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Johnny, and
Yeah,
we'll
love it. Thank you.
see you next
Thanks
time.
everybody. Thanks everyone. I love it.
Bye.